We're going to call the March 8th, 2018 regular assembly meeting to order. It is approximately 6 o'clock on March 18th. What a coincidence. And we are in the Mona Lisa Drexler Assembly Chambers this evening. We'll start with a non-sectarian invocation. We'll follow that with a Pledge of Allegiance. So please rise and join me. This evening, we give thanks for these beautiful spring days, the sunlight and the warming weather. We're thankful for these blessings and ask for wisdom to guide our communities and for the Assembly to deliberate using good judgment and fairness while conducting the public's business this evening. Amen. Please join me in the pledge. The flag is right behind you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to note for the record that Mr. Quist is going to be late and Mr. Roberts is excused. Mr. Lojeski?
Here.
Mr. Tackey?
Here.
Mr. Cooper?
Here.
Ms. Major?
Here.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Lawrence?
Here.
We have Council Member Cleaver?
Here.
And Ms. Dodge? Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So, we now have a safety announcement, and that is, so in case of an emergency, we have emergency exits. One, of course, is out the door that you came in, and then we also have a little door behind this column and another door behind that column. And if you go out to the left and out to the right, you will, my left, my right, you'll find the outside. So, is there anyone that wishes to remove items from the consent agenda? Are there any other procedural motions anyone has? So, does anyone need to declare a possible conflict of interest for items on the consent agenda? Excuse me. I see no one raising their hand. So that takes us to citizens' comments, and we have two types of citizens' comments at this time. We have one that is for items on the agenda but not available for public comment, and then we have one that is just for anything not on the agenda at all. So we'll start with citizen comments item A, which is to testify on an agenda item not scheduled for public hearing, such as memorandums, bid awards, unfinished business, resolutions, or ordinances being advanced to a public hearing on a different date. Each person has up to 3 minutes. I have no one signed up. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on items on the agenda not available for public testimony? I see no one coming forward, so we'll close those comments, citizens' comments, and we will open up the citizens' comments that are a section to speak on anything not scheduled on the agenda. So take the agenda, rest of the world. I have Jennifer Hawk signed up. If you'd like to come forward, please. If you give us your name and address for the record, you'll have 3
My name
minutes.
is Jennifer Hawk. I'm at 1611 Southern Avenue, Fairbanks, 99709.
Thank you.
Okay. So on February 22nd, 2018, at the Assembly's further meeting, during the last item on your docket, a vague amendment was placed before you of having a meaningful discussion regarding the horrific shooting of February 14th, 2018 by a teen in high school in Florida, killing 17 and injuring many more. While I feel the frustration of such violence and understand the desire to do something about it, I'm here to remind this Assembly that you as a whole do not have constitutional authority to act on the rights of law-abiding citizens to own firearms. Furthermore, decisions of how schools and businesses should choose to protect those on or within their property, whether I agree with them or not, is for them to decide, not you. Because the amendment was seconded and discussion of such topic was taken up, a couple things need to be addressed. First, a reference toward assault weapon or weapons was made. The term assault weapon is unclear. Do you mean assault rifle, assault knife, assault hammer, or assault frying pan? All of these have been used at some point in time to commit an assault or prevent an assault. Please use terminology that is accurate and clear. If assault weapon was intended to reference assault rifle, again, let's be clear. An AR-15 is shorthand for Armalite rifle. They are not assault rifles. Assault rifles, by definition, are able, with a switch, to operate as a full automatic or semi-automatic rifle. AR is not capable of doing this, as referenced by the ATF. Such rifles are already heavily regulated. You're not able to just buy one. Please bear in mind that evil remains evil regardless of the instrument used to commit a crime or the laws laid down to prevent a crime. You can't legislate it out. Evil will find a way. Law-abiding citizens need the ability to defend themselves against those intent on committing evil. The second reference made by an Assembly member was to Australia and China for gun control comparisons. I don't have the time to give you the accurate stats, but I do have them with me, along with recent mass assaults in schools used by knife, and those recent CDC stats on leading causes of death. I do have one question regarding China. Why would we want to compare our freedoms to a communist country that slaughtered 20 million of its own unarmed citizens simply because they were political dissidents? A country whose president is currently in the process of becoming an emperor? A country who severely limits its people, God-given rights. As for our own United States, any state, borough, county, or city that dictates what the people are allowed to have as a firearm for their own protection infringes on constitutional rights. Those that have placed or are in the process of placing limitations as to what law-abiding citizens may or may not own have violated their own oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Your job as a borough assembly does not include having a discussion about meaningful discussions of reform in any matter involving constitutional rights, even for the purpose of addressing Juneau with your thoughts. That is for the people of Fairbanks, North Star Borough, to decide if they, as free citizens of the United States of America, want the federal government to make such changes to any part of our Constitution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good timing. Let's see if there are any questions for you, Ms. Hawk. Mr. Quist.
Thank you for your testimony. So on the subject of this not being the appropriate forum or us not having the appropriate authority to discuss this, I just wanted to clarify, you said sending a message to Juneau. I just wanted to make sure first that you knew that this resolution was to go to Washington, D.C.
It has to go to Juneau. Well, it goes through Juneau to our representatives that go to Washington, D.C.
So specifically, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that this resolution, the presiding officer just went on the trip so she can tell us, but my understanding is that this was to be a starting point for a conversation with our delegation in D.C.
That's correct.
So, so I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. I guess my question is, do you think that I and U.S. citizens in general have a unlimited constitutional right to arms?
An unlimited right? Well, the Second Amendment says we do.
So if I could follow up, do I have a constitutional right to biological weapons or nuclear arms? I don't mean this facetiously.
I understand what you're saying. Those are not addressed within the Second Amendment. They are specifically towards firearms. George Washington, Thomas Paine, and others have written documents that specify what they were talking about. And I have those with me.
So one last one, if you don't mind. Do I have an unlimited right to firearms then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Hawk? Yes, Mr. Wojcicki.
Sure. Would you agree with the interpretation that the Second Amendment guarantees the personal right to bear arms equivalent to modern standing armies?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate you. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lawrence.
Ms. Hawk, supposed to ask you a question, so do you realize that I certainly don't understand you? And given Mr. Wojcicki's question, I suspect that nobody on this dais agrees with what you just said regarding
figure that.
the Second Amendment, including it gives civilians the right to have the same arms that we give our soldiers and policemen to protect us.
It's in the Federalist Papers.
And so what we don't do is debate with,
No debate. Just no nuance.
that's to all of us. It's not addressed to, we're just being
That's right, got my information
thoughtful here.
so.
Yes.
That's
Any other?
all.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I understand that's where you got your info. We just try to make sure that we have good conversations that are respectful. And
I appreciate that.
We have bounds that we explore regularly. Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak on items not on the agenda at all? Seeing none, we're going to close citizens' comments B. And
Could you note for the record that I've joined?
yes, thank you. Mr. Quist has joined us. Thank you. That takes us to approval of agenda and consent agenda. Does anyone need to declare a possible conflict of interest for items on the consent agenda? See no one raising their hand. Are there any other items to be removed from the consent agenda before it's read? See no indication. Clerk, would you please read the consent agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under approval of minutes, regular assembly meeting minutes of February 8th, 2018, special assembly meeting minutes of February 15th, 2018, regular assembly meeting minutes of February 22nd, 2018. Communications to the assembly, we have IFB number 18003, Big Dipper Locker Room Improvements, approval of base bid as submitted by Alcan Builders, Inc. in the amount of $108,991. We have a contract award, NASPO Value Point. It's a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. The approval of the contract with Software House International in the amount of $200,373.13 for the initial 1 year period and a total of $601,119.39. If the 2 1-year renewal options are exercised, we have a memorandum from Mayor Castle recommending the appointment of John Davies and Samantha Reynolds to the Sustainability Commission. We have a memorandum from Mayor Castle recommending the appointment of various service area commissioners. Under consideration of calendar new business resolutions, we have Resolution 2018-13, a resolution authorizing a public utility easement to Golden Valley Electric Association on borough land within Section 13, Township 3 North, Range 2 West, Fairbanks Meridian. This is in the Himalaya subdivision area. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. Consideration of calendar new business ordinances to be introduced and advanced to a public hearing. We have ordinance 2017-20-1V and ordinance amending the fiscal year 2017-18 budget by appropriating $3,750 in federal pass-through grant funding to the Special Revenue Fund for 3 Alaska State Library continuing education grants. Sponsor is Mayor Castle. Refer to the Finance Committee on March 15th, 2018, advanced to March 22nd, 2018 for public hearing. We have ordinance 2018-10, an ordinance amending Fairbanks North Star Borough Code 3.16.040 regarding rules for public testimony. The sponsor is Assemblymember Wojcicki. I refer to the Committee of the Whole on March 15th, 2018, advanced to March 22nd, 2018 for public hearing. And that concludes your consent agenda.
Thank you very much.
Move to approve the agenda and consent agenda. Second.
So moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Gray. Is there any objection to approving the consent agenda as presented, as read?
So can I just make
Yes,
a correction?
Ms.
So I'm sorry. Actually, for if you don't mind, I feel bad. The clerk made an error on the last date. It's not March 18th. It's March 22nd.
Thank you
Thank you very much. So noted. Is there any objection to the consent agenda as read and amended? Seeing none, that's approved. And that takes us to messages from the Borough Mayor. Mayor, have you messages for us?
Sure, just a couple of fun things this evening. So a flyover view of the VISTA program, because we're transitioning from spring to summer, kind of as we speak, as far as the VISTA program is concerned. I think most of you understand we've got full-time year-round VISTAs and 10 different programs that we're engaged in right now with VISTAs, and things are going really well with those programs. So we're working with the Boys and Girls Club, Breadline, Fairbanks Housing and Homeless Coalition, Noel Wing Library, our Parks and Rec Department here at the Borough, Fairbanks Soil and Water Conservation, also Fairbanks Youth Advocates over at the Door, and Restore Incorporated Reentry Program, and Tanana Chiefs Conference. So those are our current 10 programs, and we've got 9 of those VISTA positions filled. We do have one that recently became vacant, and we're working to fill that one, but all those programs are still functioning. And as we transition with summertime, we get summer associates come in just for the summer season, and we have put a request into VISTA for 19 of those. So we're optimistic that we'll get the majority of them. There's a couple that are kind of new programs. One of interest is we're looking for a couple of VISTAs to help us with like woodsheds over at our air quality department, which is a little bit different than what VISTAs are normally doing. So they're taking a closer look at the write-up on our grant request for that. But hopefully we'll get a couple of those folks to work on that program. So things going very well with VISTA, and lots of kudos from the VISTA program too with all that we're getting accomplished. I did hand out on your desk the legal size sheets of paper with the little pins stuck in the map. Kind of fun stuff on this. It's showcasing what is coming online with our GIS program that we've been working on in-house. This is an incredibly powerful tool. The top map that you have in front of us, the green pins indicate where we have no ash waivers for different households. The stage 1 waivers are indicated by orange pins on that particular map. And then the second page that you have are the wood stove change-out program participants. That's the WS comp on the top, the heading there. That's the wood stove change-out program. You can see all the different, every one of those pins indicates a household where we've changed out a device, and they've worked on our program. So this is air quality information, obviously, but our GIS system is getting to be a real incredible tool and being recognized around the state. I'd like Mr. Williams to give us just a little more information on that.
Sure. So, the Assembly is pretty familiar with some of the GIS tools that we're using from day to day. You see a lot of it all the time in some of the mappings and, like, say, products that come from the Planning Commission or the Planning Board. You'll get maps, and a lot of that comes from GIS layers. And what we're learning, and we're learning it kind of through hard knocks because we are learning, but we're learning that the data that's associated with the GIS systems that we're using, we can use data in much different ways now. So, for example, this stage 1 waiver, if we were to just store this in an Excel spreadsheet, it would just be a list of data. But now that I put for each data point, now I have a location on a map with that data. It makes our code enforcement work out in the field much, much better, because now I have a person with a tablet computer, and they say, oh, this person already has a stage 1 waiver. They just drive right by it. There's so many different ways we could apply this information. For example, another one, maybe we work on this, maybe we don't. But one that a practical example would be like, let's say we get a list of 6 dog bite cases. Well, if you just see it on a straight data table, it's just 6 dog bite cases. But if I plot that data and I plot it spatially, and I see they're all within like 2 blocks of each other, that's probably something significant that we want to drill our efforts into in that neighborhood and see if we can affect an outcome in that area. The sky is the limit with how we can use our GIS mapping software for. It could help us with all kinds of things like any type of land administration, elections, official statistics, any type of public works projects. The sky's the limit. So anyway, we wanted to share this with you and show you what we're up to.
Okay. Do you want some questions now, or do you want to wait?
That's it for the report.
Oh, okay. So, Mr. Gray.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, this is great. It's really stacked on top of itself. I was wondering if it's possible to maybe see the 2 areas a little more zoomed in some way, shape, or form. But
Absolutely. So this is what's
it's like pins on top of pins.
So the pins are in what's called a layer. So it's a layer of data, and I can stack different layers of data on top of each other, and you can analyze it, and we can zoom in on it. There's all kinds of things you can do. What we want to do long term is see how do we get more of this information in real time into the hands of the public, and how do we create a real two-way interaction using this type of data. We haven't cracked that nut yet, but I think we will at some point, and we're just getting really good at managing the back end systems.
That's great. Thanks.
Any other questions? I had a few. I was surprised at the number of no ashes. I'm wondering how many we have issued.
I don't have that number off the top of my
I
head.
think it's 129
It looks
or 123.
like
It's 120 something.
Okay, thank you. And I was also observing that, as you were saying, you can see patterns, and there's a significant similarity to the patterns of the replaced stoves and no ashes and stage 1 burns. It would be another interesting question would be how many of those that have been changed out are now stage 1 and no ash. Thank you. Any other questions for the mayor or for Mr. Williams? Seeing none, thank you very much. That takes us to reports of special and standing committees, and we'll start with you, Mr. Tackey.
I have nothing to report.
Okay. Mr. Wojcicki.
No report.
How about an Aurora report?
It was out last night. It was
you.
moderate to quiet, but very good to look at.
Thank you. Mr. Gray.
I don't remember if we talked about it last week, but the RSAC meeting scheduled for next Monday is canceled due to lack of business items, so we'll pick that up in May, I believe.
Okay, super. Mr. Lawrence.
I have no report.
Okay. Ms. Major.
No report, thank you.
Mr. Quist.
Thank you. The Sustainability Commission will be meeting on the 14th at 6:30 at the Norway Public Library Conference Room. the agenda previously had been they were looking to get some training, legal training. Instead, I think they are going to be taking up a draft fact sheet. So they're working the big, I mentioned during the last report, the big thing that the Sustainability Commission's initially working on in discovering themselves as a new commission is the ability to host these town halls and get some guidance from the community as to what their role could or should be. So in doing that, they're continuing the discussion of planning town halls and the details, and then also this fact sheet, the agenda, and that document have been published. The Air Pollution Control Commission meets on the 20th. The agenda hasn't been published, but it's kind of a different meeting in that it's going to be they're hearing variances. So there's no other business on the agenda.
Thank you. And Mr. Cooper.
Sure, I'll repeat a little bit what I said last week since not everybody was here. I guess 2.5 weeks ago now, as chair of the finance committee, I went to the school board budget presentation along with Mr. Williams. That's when the administration introduced their budget to the board. Mr. Williams prepared a great presentation on some of the challenges facing the borough. I think it was good to have that dialogue with the school board so they could understand our situation and we could start to understand some of the issues they're facing. So I'm sure that we'll hear more about that as they proceed. And I'm sure you've already seen some discussion in the paper about some of their budget choices that they're having to make. And along those lines, I think everybody received an email. The school district will end up presenting its budget to the finance committee on April 12th at 5 p.m. So it's before our regular assembly meeting is a special finance committee meeting. So mark your calendars now for that date. We'll be meeting a little bit earlier. And also, about 2 weeks ago, in Mr. Lawrence's absence, I got to attend the FNSB policy committee meeting. It was a pretty exciting and interesting meeting. One of the main, Mr. Cleworth was there too. So one of the main business topics that you might hear about was the decision by the policy committee to endorse a standard shoulder option for the Yankovich path as opposed to a separated path. It's an issue that was fairly split in terms of opinion on who wanted what option, but based on the presentation from DOT and what was available, it seemed to be the choice that made the most sense. So it may be something that has to come back to the Assembly in the future for approval of that modification in design and plans, but it was interesting. So thank you, Mr. Lawrence, for the opportunity to go to FNAS.
Well, I appreciate you filling in.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. So I hadn't been thinking about doing the DC report now, but it seems like a good time. It's kind of a special and standing committee. So Ms. Dolan and I went to the NACO meeting this past week, and we met with our congressional delegation Tuesday, I believe. So kind of an overview of what we spoke about. We talked to both Congressman Young and Senator Murkowski about marijuana banking. They're both working on it. Senator Murkowski's office is not overly optimistic that they have the votes to pass something, but they're trying to insert some language to help with that. We paid a lot of attention to the infrastructure project proposal from the president. Had a briefing by Senator Cho and also, or Cho, was it Cho? And the White House lead on the project, and came away with a pretty good idea. The current funding will stay whole. They're breaking the $200 billion, such a number, into quarters. 50% is, or $100 billion is being proposed to be spent on the 2080 rule, as has been discussed. So 20% by the feds, attracting public and private investment for the 80%. And their talking point there is right now, this is 20% more than you're getting because right now you get zero. I think the figure that we heard a lot was that counties own 40% of the roads and the feds pay for 14% of them or something like that. Or 40% of the infrastructure and the feds pay for 14%. Clearly they're not paying for 100%. It might even have been more like the feds pay. Yeah, the feds pay 40%. Anyway, their point was, we don't pay for much, and this is more than we're paying for now. And then they have another 25% that was going towards rural. And this is a grant, a block grant that would come to the governor's office and be distributed by the governor. I asked the White House representative how they were defining rural because we had heard the number 50,000, but it wasn't population, but it wasn't attached to anything. So I said, is that city? Is it county? Is it block? What is it? And he said, we're going to let the Congress make that determination. So that's unclear. And they're also letting Congress make the determination of how they'll distribute that $50 billion. Like, is it a billion per state? Is it per capita? So they're saying we're not going to get in that fight. So that was interesting. And the other $50 billion, I think, was going for things like wastewater, WIFIA and RIFIA and all kinds of interesting alphabet soup. I think it was wastewater and clean water and railroad money. And there was a fourth one that I didn't write down. We asked about the EPA. Of course, we talked about PM 2.5 because that's what we do. And we talked to them about point source relief. Is there a way for us to work with them, especially when we've got a power plant that's 8 to 10 years old, or that's going to be replaced in 8 to 10 years, and is putting out, 5 to 10% of our total PM 2.5, and they're going to put old controls that are going to have a kind of de minimis impact for $20 million and putting our base at risk. So we talked to them about ways we might be able to do something about that. Didn't come away with anything specific, but got some ideas on maybe further conversations. We talked to everyone about ESPs, about encouraging the EPA to work with us, or to work with them more appropriately to study the ESPs and other technology. One thing we heard that I think really stuck out to Ms. Dolan and I was from Senator Sullivan. He said that what he is hearing is that the school quality is going to be a criterion in BRAC. And I will tell you, we heard about BRAC from everybody, it seems. Would you agree, Ms. Dolan? Maybe not Mr. Young, Congressman Young, but...
We heard that from Senator Murkowski's office.
And, okay, not from...
Yeah, about
my
school
notes
quality.
are confused, apparently. I've consolidated them. So you're right, Senator Lisa. So from Senator Murkowski's office, we were told that school districts are going to be a part of the BRAC criterion, and they're concerned. Right now, our reputation as a school district is quite strong. Well, they said strong, but they're worried that the state's investment in the approach to funding schools will have an impact on that reputation. So something for us to, when we do talk to Juno, to be talking to them about, and to be keeping an eye on ourselves and addressing as we have communications with them. Anything you see you would add, Ms. Dolan?
I think you covered all the real high points for sure. So yeah, I think we're...
Thank you. And we spoke about AML, I think, a bit last week, and you spoke, Ms. Major spoke about a little bit of it. Not everybody was here, so I'll just quickly go over what I can recall, and I'll ask Ms. Major to fill in, and Mr. Mayor to fill in around the gaps. So we heard that the education budget looked like was going to be flat, but would be flat. There was not expected to be cuts. That PERS, no one's talking about changing the PERS level, but that's always vulnerable in the end. Capital budget is mostly just a match, federal match, not expecting anything more. The mayor spoke at length about our deferred maintenance, and the state said, yeah, we understand we've got a couple billion ourselves. And we spoke about Fort Wainwright. And that's kind of on the high level, what I recall in 32 seconds. How about you, Ms. May?
I think you covered it. I mean, we talked with everyone about, PM 2.5 as well.
All right, of course.
The SIP. Everything that's already been mentioned. Yeah, I feel like it was coming out of Juneau. It was sort of somber news, right? So,
Mr. Mayor? Oh, Mr. Wright?
I guess I just have one question. Is that's back to the issue of school quality. There's either the delegation or whoever was talking about the BRAC is did they give any indication as to how they were going to quantify measures of school quality? Because that seems very nebulous to me. So
no, and I'm smiling because the mayor's office had that same question, and we didn't hear anything from them. I guess what I would say is that it's almost like a bond rating is what it felt like, and so it feels like there's a reputation out there, and they're watching, right? And so. Making assumptions about if the state's not investing in education, then the quality may not be.
As long as they're not going by like Zillow school ratings or things like that.
I don't know. They did not. We didn't think to ask that. I think. Mr. Mayor, did you want to add anything about that, or Juno?
No, I think you hit the highlights, and we had talked about it before. The state is deferring maintenance as we have, and that's part of why we're not expecting to see any money in the short term on it, because as soon as the state decides to start funding capital, they're going to take care of their own first. And so we'll be a few years out before we would see any, and that was kind of a general theme coming. I think if there is a bright light, there was a recognition from quite a few of the legislators that their current budget really isn't sustainable, particularly when it comes to facilities. They understand they're deferring maintenance, they're digging a hole, and they can't continue doing that forever. So they're at least recognizing that they're going to have to address that at some point, and it's going to take some money and probably a fair amount of money to address that. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, but it still would be years out for us to see any, because it's going to take them several years to dig or fill their hole that they've been digging before they would start sending it to us.
The only thing I'd add is that we heard fairly consistently that deferred maintenance is usually bid on by local contractors, and that it's local labor that works on it. So the benefit that we might see is that at least it would be work that would be done locally. Any other thoughts on anything anyone said? Any last comments? We'll have assembly member comments at the end of the meeting. This is just a special and standing committee. In that case, we will recess until 7. Okay, we're going to call the March 8th regular assembly meeting back to order. It's about 7 o'clock on March 8th, 2018. And we will start with reports from the City of Fairbanks representative. I want to call you Mayor Cleaver, so I'll call you Councilman Cleaver. Welcome. Do you have a report for us?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about snow. We are currently working 2 10-hour shifts a day inside the city. And we're going to be doing that for almost the entire month of March, or until we get it done. We're hoping that Mother Nature doesn't melt on us too quick before we can get most of the hard pack up. We took care of the presiding officer's house the other day.
May I say thank you so much. They did a fabulous job. Please do.
I don't think we've gotten to Assemblymember Major's house, so no. We're working on that. If you want to see a complete schedule, anyone listening out there and wanting to know when they're going to be done, you can go to the city's website. And we made it a point the other night to make sure that that's up to date. And you can see approximately when your area will be affected. Speaking of that, one of the crucial things in snow removal is the snow dumps that we have. And over the years, there's been a lot of pressure because some of the location to, as people say, do something better with that land. But it is so precious that we try and protect that as much as we can. The biggest reception site we have is over by the Big Dipper. And we have worked with Chief Andrew Isaac's Center. They've been purchasing some land from us over there, which we hesitate to sell because it's so precious there. But the last time we did that, we utilized those funds to expand in the Bentley Trust area. Behind the Bentley Mall there, we procured some more land there, and we're over in Lizelle Estates at the base of Birch Hill. We purchased some land there. And we're also now looking at where Reflections used to be on South Fairbanks. I don't know how many of you ever used to patronize them. We're looking at that building and possibly taking that down and adding to the snow dump facility that we bought about 5 years ago to double the size of that. So we're very conscious of that and trying to add more space, because as we fill them in a heavy year, it adds to the drive time and it slows us way down. So that's probably all you want to know about snow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cleaver. Yes, Ms. Major.
So I just, since you brought up snow, I do want to thank you for what you brought forward to the rest of the council to allocate the extra money for snow removal living in the city. It's been a tough year to drive around. I mean, not just in my neighborhood, but anywhere, even walking in the Pegger Bridge, or the sidewalk that runs along Pegger is such a heavy pedestrian traffic area, and when it's not cleared, just puts people out on the road or in other places. And I don't envy the position that you guys are in this year, but thank you for allocating some additional funds to snow removal, because we need it. And you're right, a slow thaw would be helpful at this point.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would like to say thank you to the crew. This year they had a little articulated device that cleared the sidewalk so that the blade didn't have to clear it, and then the blade came through, and I really appreciate it. I know anyone else driving down my street is deeply appreciative, and I would appreciate you saying thank you to them.
I will pass that on.
And I recently had coffee with a friend who is disabled, and he was talking about how difficult it is to navigate our streets, and it really gave me another appreciation for why keeping our sidewalks cleaned is important. So I know it's a challenge, as you say, it's a challenge. When it's a challenge for me to walk, it's a challenge for others that don't have two legs that are as functional. Yes, Mr. Lawrence.
Question for Mr. Cleworth. My recollection is that the City Council passed an ordinance, I think it was last summer or fall, regarding property owners being required to shovel their sidewalks.
Correct.
Is that being enforced?
That's actually always been on the books. As a business owner, I have to shovel my sidewalks. I'm supposed to be doing that. The residential property owner is supposed to do that in front of the house. The ordinance that happened last summer was to kind of put more teeth into it, but whether the Public Works Director has used any of that, I do not know, because they have a right to ticket or give a warning and then ticket. They also wanted to strengthen the fact people should not push the snow into the center of the streets. You can put it on the curb. And there was a misunderstanding there. He wasn't clear on that spot. We got a lot of phone calls, because when you shovel a sidewalk, you put it on the curb, and that's fine. You just don't put it in the middle of the street, which creates a little bumper berm there.
Thanks.
So I'm raising the hand so that I can recognize myself, I guess. I actually flew to Seattle next to Mr. Jacobson at the Public Works Director, and he says that what he's doing is talking to people. But if there's somebody that is not cleaning their sidewalk, that, I don't know what his criteria is, but then he just goes and chats with them, and he says usually they comply. I don't think he's had to issue citations.
Try not to.
Yeah. Anything else for Councilman Cleworth? Seeing none, snow is apparently a passionate subject for us here. Welcome, Councilwoman Welsh. And Hunter?
Hunter. And the Hunter's where I'm at for work, yes. I'm here tonight just because the person that was supposed to be here is too buried under trying to work with the DOT people with snow removal. So he was pretty exhausted. So when he asked me, I said, "Oh, that's not a problem. I can come and answer any questions and give you a little update on North Pole."
Super.
Well, we've had some issues out on the Old Ridge, and they have a very nice little survey they have set up with DOT and Kinney Engineering. They're working on getting things straightened out up there, and they have a survey online. So they would like people who are affected by that area to go on there. And I can give you the address here. It's http:// dot, and then there's a period, alaska.gov/NERG/Old Ridge. / and they really want some input on people who have issues with any of the traffic stuff that goes on the Old Ridge within North Pole. They had an accident out there on the Monday that we were meeting last Monday. They involved a school bus on the corner right there on North Pole Boulevard and 8th Avenue and the Old Ridge. And so they're really working on that. And then when I was coming home today, there was actually this, I don't know what kind of a delivery vehicle that was turning onto the Old Ridge from the highway. And just continued straight into the berm and almost into the parking lot of the liquor store right there on the corner. So there's definitely some issues that we need to work on out there. We're also very excited that the mayor is almost done with putting the application for the military facility zone into wherever it's supposed to go at. Yeah. So he got the draft ready, and he's about ready to send it in, and hopefully that will be beneficial for everybody. We're also very excited for both Mr. Butler and the mayor himself. We're working with developers to get some new lots, both for housing and commercial property inside the city of North Pole. Not only the property with the Ainsley, that's connected with the Ainsley property that we talked about last time I was here, but also a couple of other pieces of property and different developers. So things are looking up. And I guess the last thing we can really report is that the mayor has been accepted to go to the Association of Defense Communities Leadership School in Washington, D.C. This coming week, I believe, the 12th through the 15th. And so we're really looking forward to him getting some insight into what they want to teach him about what it means to be a member of a community that has military in their vicinity. I think that's pretty much it.
Very good. Thank you. Let's see if there are any questions for you. I don't see any. Thank you for a thorough report.
You're welcome.
So we don't have anyone from the school board this evening. So we will move on to special orders, public hearing. And we will start with ordinance number 2017-20-1U, an ordinance amending the FY 2017-18 budget by appropriating $120,000 from the School District Facilities Maintenance Reserve to the Capital Projects Fund for School District Facilities Management / Warehouse Building Water Service Replacement. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. It's on page 75 of your packet. And Mayor Castle, do you have a staff report?
Absolutely. To Mr. David Bradley.
Thank you. So this ordinance is to appropriate funds from the School District Facility Maintenance Reserve to the Capital Project Fund for the purpose of replacing the water service at the School District Facility Maintenance Building. So this previous summer, the underground water service failed. They were able to temporarily repair it, but it was identified as something that needed to be replaced. The school board has passed a resolution approving the project and the use of the school district FMR. So the intention is to go out this summer, replace it, and then there's some associated piping work inside the building also. That concludes my staff report.
Super. Thank you. So we're going to begin public hearing. Find my public sheet. So I'm going to open public hearing on ordinance 2017-20-1U. And I don't have anyone signed up for this. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this? Seeing no one coming forward and heads shaking negatively, I'm going to close public hearing.
Move to adopt. Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Cooper and seconded by Mr. Tacky. And I see Mr. Lawrence, you have your hand up.
Mr. Bradley, where is the school maintenance building?
It's over in the railroad industrial area.
And what is it used for?
It's where they house their maintenance personnel for maintaining all the school facilities.
All right. Thank you.
Any other assembly debate, discussion, questions? Mayor, it's dangerous to raise your hand and adjust your glasses. Okay, seeing none, it appears that we are ready to vote. Clerk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Tacky?
Yes.
Mr. Lachewski?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Ms. Dodge?
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none?
8-0.
It's adopted 8-0. And that takes us to ordinance number 2018-08, an ordinance amending FNSBC Title V regarding elections. I'm a sponsor, so I'm going to pass the gavel to Mr. Lawrence.
All right. The sponsors are Assembly Members Dodge, Mayor Castle, and members Cooper and Lachewski. All right. And I'd like to have a staff report. We can start with the mayor's office. Or no, okay. We'll start with Ms. Dodge.
There you go. Okie dokie. So this is an ordinance that you'll remember we had a work session on this month, 6 weeks ago, maybe even 2 months ago. And as a result of the discussion on the assembly, we put together an ordinance addressing the things that we heard and maybe a few other things that were cleanup from the clerks. So I'm going to do a sectional analysis because it's a little complicated. So I will start on section 2 in the area item 7. And here we are changing the time for declarations of candidacy. We're closing, we're delaying the time, the deadline for declaring candidacy to 5 p.m. And that is because of an item that is addressed actually in section 3, line 78 and 79. We used to give people 30 minutes to make changes, and so that's why it was 4:30 and moved to 5. We're instead proposing to change that so that people have 7 days to consider whether they have a correction, amendment, or a withdrawal. And that's because the clerks typically have up to 7 days anyway that they plan in their cycle, because it can take that long for someone filing at the last minute to get their APOC information completed and validated and verified. So that is what's going on with section 2, items B. And section 2, item F, is something that the clerks asked us to do. And this really allows for, it just really is gathering information for write-in candidates so that if they have sufficient write-in people voting for write-in candidates, they'll actually have the information already on file to help them as they judge the election. And this is something that we as a group came to a conclusion that may or may not be what the body wants, is that we thought that we would give them until 5 o'clock the day before the election just for filing this as a write-in. And then we already talked about section 3, line 78 and 79, area, section 3A. And then we have section 3B. And this, of course, addresses the IGU issue that we saw, that we experienced this past year. Yes, Mr. Lachewski, I'm in staff report. Pardon me?
Section 4.
Thank you, section 4. Yep, he's right. Section 4 lines 88 through 90. And this essentially, like I say, resolves the issue that we had with IGU this last year, so that members of IGU that are elected will be seated immediately following the certification of the election. We added a little bit of detail so that currently sitting members would not have their term foreshortened. So what we've done essentially is grandfather those people that are currently seated to give them their full 3 years, and the people that are replacing them will be seated in January until we've cycled through that. So they will have a 2-year and 10-month term initially. And then we go to Section 5F, and this is a clarification that the clerks asked for also. It just clarifies that not just candidates, but also contact people for initiatives or referendums shall not be part of running the election. It just is for optics, really. Well, make sure we all understand that we have fair elections, our goal. So then we go to Section 6, Item 115, and here currently we have a defeated candidate has 24 hours to complete or to say that they want to recount. And after discussion, we changed that to 1 business day because we felt that if it was 11 o'clock that the numbers came out, maybe people really would have decided by the end of the next business day, as opposed to 11 o'clock that night. So we would give them really a business day to think about it. And then we're on Section 6C, and here we are addressing we're still in the recount area. What do we call it? We call it recount application. And the clerks went through and they calculated the cost per precinct for running the election in 2017. They came up with like $197. So we thought that we would change this deposit requirement to the $200 per precinct to be reflective, so that people have a good estimate, and we're collecting what we think is a good estimate for any recount that might be requested. And then in Item D, we expanded the current number of votes that automatically trigger a recount, because right now it's a tie. And after discussion, we came to the thought that 10 votes might be an appropriate trigger point. So again, this is a discussion item that the body may or may not choose to or have a different opinion about, but that's where we landed. And what this does basically is say, if it's 10 or less, then the borough will initiate a recount at the borough's expense. The clerks went back in the records and discovered that this would have triggered 2 recounts in the last couple of decades, one in like 08. I don't have my notes in front of me, maybe a little earlier, 06. It was between Tammy Wilson and, his name just flew out of my head. Yeah, Charlie Rex. And then the one last year would have also triggered one. So it's one a decade or so, and that would be triggered. And we added something about, we gave a defeated candidate an option for up to 24 hours to just say, you don't need to do that. So then we have Section 7B. And here we're just clarifying who makes the decision, essentially just saying it is the clerk that has the final determination of a ballot, interpreting a ballot in a recount situation. And this is so that we don't have to haul, the clerk and all of her board to court. Jill has 1 person to work with. And that concludes my staff report.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dodge. Further staff report from the other sponsors, Mr. Cooper or Mr. Lejeski?
I think everything was covered.
All right, Mayor?
Just that you do have some amendments in your yellow folder, and I would support both of them. The first amendment is just some clarification on the IGU portion of that, explaining how we're not shortening the term of somebody in office. Just a little bit of a cleanup clarification. Amendment number 2 is adding in writing, so that when a candidate concedes the election, they have to do so in writing, not just verbally with the clerk's office, which is good business, to say the least, to have it in writing. So we certainly endorse both of those amendments. Thank you.
All right, that concludes the staff report. All right, I'm going to open up this ordinance for public hearing. There is nobody signed up to testify at this point. Would anybody wish to come forward and speak regarding ordinance number 2018-08, which is amending the Fairbanks North Star Borough Code Title V regarding elections? Seeing no one approach, we'll close public comment.
Move to adopt. Second.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt. I'm going to give it to Mr. Tackey, seconded by Mr. Gray. Assembly debate and questions for staff, or questions for the sponsors. Ms. Dodge.
I would move amendment number 1.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to amend the ordinance as stated in amendment number 1, which is in our yellow folders. And we have a second from Mr. Tackey. Ms. Dodge.
Would you like me to read that? So on line 87, I would move to add the language. Let me get to it. So I think it's on line 87, after qualified, or add a comma and add unless otherwise provided in this subsection.
All right, so we have an amendment on the floor. It's seconded. Debate and questions.
Objection.
Yeah, all right. Is there any objection? All right, that amendment passes. Ms. Dodge.
Thank you. I'd also like to move to amend line 128 to add the words in writing. It would read, the clerk shall cease a recount under the subsection if a defeated candidate can seize the election in writing no later than the close of business 2 days after completion of the canvass.
Second. All right, we have a motion to amend. Let's see, what line is that?
Line 128.
128. To add the words in writing if a defeated candidate wishes to decline the recount. I have a second from Mr. Gregg. Discussion or debate? Mr. Wojcicki.
So a question probably for the attorney, does email count as in writing?
Yeah, I think it would. I don't know if it would, wouldn't you accept that,
I
Nancy?
would accept it if it was in writing from the candidate.
As long as we had that email address of record. And
It was right coming from the email address that they gave
That's
you when you
correct.
filed.
The email address that would be on their declaration of candidacy from the candidate is what I would.
All right, further questions or debate? Does anybody oppose this amendment? All right, seeing none, that amendment has been approved. Further debate or discussion? Mr. Cooper.
Excuse me. I just wanted to express my appreciation for the co-sponsors. We got a good, cohesive group of people working on this and coming up with ideas on how to improve the elections code from the administration, the clerk's office, and the assembly. I think it makes some good changes, and it actually puts us more in line with the way the city does some of its work as well. So I think it makes sense. I do have one question, and this is really just more clarification, so it's on the record. In section 2F, which is on line 69, a writing candidate filing a declaration of candidacy, that's just a declaration with the clerk. That doesn't lead to their name ending up on the ballot, correct?
Correct.
Just want to get that out there so that it's clear that just by filing a declaration of candidacy, your name does not end up on the ballot as a write-in, not an end run around filing during the filing period.
Yeah, that's correct. If they can file by 5 p.m. on the close of, if they wouldn't be considered a write-in. I think the write-in language says it would be after that.
All right, further questions or comments? Mr. Wojcicki.
Well, I guess just in the same section, so it's on the record. My recollection of the discussion and intent behind the co-sponsors there is it's there to help the clerk's office, just that they know that there's a write-in candidate. So if they see the total quantity of write-ins go, say, above, to a potentially winning number on election night, then they know that it's likely to be voting for somebody who's actually running and not simply protest votes.
All right. Ms. Dodd.
And I would just speak in favor of this. This is a cleanup of miscellaneous things and things that we've learned, certainly in this last election. And yeah, I think it is representative of all of the different lessons we learned.
All right, any further amendments or debate? All right, seeing none, clerk, let's vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Tackey.
Yes.
Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Ms. Major.
Yes.
Mr. Quist.
Yes.
Mr. Wojcicki.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Ms. Dodge.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote?
0.
8-0. The ordinance passes 8-0. I'm going to hand the gavel back to Ms. Dodd.
Thank you, sir. So that takes us to consideration of calendar unfinished business, of which there is none. It takes us to another citizens' comment period. So I'll open them. And this is for items that are not scheduled for public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to speak about items not available for public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close those comments. And that takes us to consideration of calendar new businesses, ordinance to be referred to committees or commissions, of which there are none. And that takes us to another citizens' comments. Each person's, and I'll open that. And this is for items that, other than those appearing on the agenda, so anything that anyone wishes to speak on. I see no one coming forward, so we'll close those. And that takes us to assembly member comments. Let's start with you, Ms. Major.
I have no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Quist.
I have no comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
I'm feeling very commenty today, so no comments.
Okay. Mr. Tackey.
Just happy to be back after having missed 2 weeks on a family vacation, but I got to listen in, and I'm really disappointed I missed a couple of those meetings. So, thanks.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Mr. Wojcicki.
I'd like to echo comments from Mr. Cooper that for the group that came together to sponsor the election tune-up, I guess I'll call it. I thought everyone contributed really good ideas, came together, and it was just a productive brainstorming meeting that turned out with the tune-up. So I'm really appreciative of everybody else who did that.
Thank you. Good term. Mr. Gray.
I have no further comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
This may be certainly one of the shortest assembly meetings we've had in a long time, and there are people out there who probably think that's a good thing.
Mr. Mayor, any last comments?
I think I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Well, I want to wish Mr. Roberts a very congratulations. Mr. Roberts got married, I believe, this weekend, and we look forward to meeting his new wife, and we wish them many, 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 many happy years together. And I almost pulled the appointment of Mr. Davies from the consent agenda just so I could wax eloquent about what a great appointment that was. Thank you for, it's such a logical, he was appointed to this, for the listening audience, he was appointed to the Sustainability Commission this evening, and it just makes so much sense. So thank you for that nomination, and thank you, Mr. Davies, for being willing to serve. We look forward to hearing your reports. And we've already done our DC report, so we'll conclude with an assembly schedule for the next week. Thursday, March 15th, we have a finance committee at 5:30 in the assembly chambers with committee of the whole work session immediately following. And I have a reminder here for some of us that the annual APOC public financial disclosure statements are due no later than March 15th. What day is that next week? Is that like Wednesday-ish? Thursday? Next Thursday for those who have not yet filed. For those of you that have filed, kudos. With that, we're adjourned.